Children are innate. They love to learn. They're curious. They're fascinated. They want to know more. It's not just about meeting their needs. It's about making sure that we're keeping that spark, that love of learning going. I worry for some children that we kill that spark.
Hello and welcome to No Running in the Corridors, the rebel podcast that aims to rewrite the school rulebook, one regulation at a time. My name is Helen Mulley, and once again I find myself in the dusty depths of the secret meeting room, ready to put another sacred cow of the education system through its paces with two fabulous guests. Nathan Burns, also known as Mr. Metacognition, works closely with schools on metacognition, challenge culture, independence, and helping children build classrooms where students think more deeply and learn more effectively. Welcome to the podcast, Nathan.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. And Kayte Cooling-Smith is a multi-award-winning early years practitioner. She's also a writer and an advocate of slow pedagogy, of which perhaps we might hear more later. Hello, Kayte.
Hi, Helen. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you for coming. I am so glad you could both join me today, and I'm really looking forward to getting stuck into today's rule. But before we do, I am going to bring out my favourite icebreaker to use for these discussions. And I'm going to ask each of you in turn the same question, which is, do you see yourself as a rule follower or a rule breaker? And I am going to start with Nathan.
I think I'm definitely a rule follower. I have sleepless nights if I know that I've not been following the rules. I am that person who, when a police car drives past on the other side of the road, I'm thinking, am I doing anything wrong? Is it me? Are they going to arrest me? Oh my goodness, it's all over. And I'm there just driving along at 20 miles an hour. But yes, I'm definitely a stickler for the rules.
Okay, how about you, Kayte?
Okay, so playing on Nathan's fears a little bit, I'm actually the daughter of a policeman. I grew up in a police house with a police station in our garden. So, I think for the most part, I was definitely a rule follower, but then I found punk a little bit later on in my teenage years. Broke the rules a little bit then, but obviously as an early years practitioner, I've come around full circle. Obviously, rules are there for a reason. I don't mind challenging them if I feel that they're not fair or having a positive impact. So, yeah.
I hear you. And I think that's definitely given us a taste of what's to come. I'm loving the dynamic between you two now. And I can feel Nathan squirm from here.
Yeah, oh, yes.
And so with our appetites whetted, I think it's time to bring out our main dish of the day. And our rule today is this: summer-born kids must stay put. Which might need a little bit of explanation, actually, because what I really want us to be thinking about is the broad expectation, in the UK at least, that children start school at a certain age and then progress through the system along with their chronological peers. So yes, there is some more flexibility in some of the devolved nations than in England, for example, but essentially everyone understands that this is how it works. And this means that, for example, parents of children born in August know that their child will, throughout their education career, be treated the same as those born nearly a year earlier than them. And that includes reporting for working at the expected level, taking high-stakes exams, and so on. So I am going to start with asking you, Nathan, whether you think those parents of August-born children have reason to feel concerned about this.
I feel like I'm going to start with a sitting on the fence answer. I think it's a yes and a no, which maybe isn't all too helpful as an answer. I think definitely there is reasonable concern, because if you are born in August and you are, for want of a better phrase, sort of competing with students who are born in September, you are in the same school year. Obviously, those age-related expectations, you can both be aged 3 or in the same school year, but 12 months difference in development at the age of 3, at the age of 4, at the age of 5. It's huge, isn't it? We wouldn't expect a 1-year-old to do the same as a 2-year-old, but a few years down the line, they'll be in the same school year. Yeah. So I do think there's an unfairness there, and a consideration of what those expectations are versus the birth month is really important. But then by the time you get to the age of 16, 18, you've done GCSEs, you've done A-levels, obviously, the longer you're in the education system, the less those months have an impact. Sort of as a percentage of your time in education, those months have less of an impact. So I definitely think it's something that I understand why parents would be concerned. But I think as time goes on, I think those gaps can close.
Okay, so Kate, from your perspective, what kind of a difference can those few months really make?
Yeah, so I do understand what Nathan's saying, and I do agree to some extent, but I am actually the mother of a summer-born boy. He is the very end of August, and we did defer him. He's just coming to the end of reception at the moment. So I have like practitioner experience, but I also have that kind of like family experience of those concerns and those worries. And although, yes, I do feel that by the end of their education, like career, they will have caught up, I worry, and these are the concerns that I had, that my son coming into reception at 4 years old, it's kind of like I didn't want the pressure for him. I didn't want him to have to play catch up. I didn't want him to have to work that little bit harder when I was umming and ahhing about whether to do it, because there is a lot of negative kind of like, rhetoric around deferring your child. And a lot of people will tell you, you're not making the right decision. I was speaking to a colleague and they made a really valid point that it would be the difference between him surviving or thriving at school. And I wanted him to have a positive experience. So from my point of view, yes, I know that they do catch up and that there is that potential to catch up. I just wanted that positive experience for him. So yeah, that's kind of my feelings about it.
Of course, Nathan.
So it's quite interesting you said that, Kate. Obviously, with a little one born at the end of August. So my youngest was born in October, and we almost had a bit of the flip for her, that when she was coming up to sort of like the end of nursery, needing to go into reception, it was really difficult to actually get her into nursery, because in the class with her were little ones who were 12, some of them were almost like 18 months younger than her. And obviously the development at that age, she is completely ready for reception. She's been in that nursery school setting for 18 months. She's kind of going through the curriculum almost like the second time, whereas there were others who were just stepping into it for the first time. She just really stopped enjoying that. Obviously, the other ones that were in that class weren't playing how she would want to play. They couldn't converse how she wanted to converse. They couldn't do the arts and crafts how she wanted. And obviously, it made it really difficult. Obviously, difficult for the teachers trying to cater for such a span of age. Difficult for her. So I know that when we eventually got her into reception, there was definitely a relief from us and a relief from her that sort of that age difference and that development difference was closed for her, and she had more students around her who were able to do some of those things. So I think it definitely works sort of both ways, and that's not to say that we shouldn't put an August born in because it's going to be to the detriment of an October born. But in terms of those group dynamics and those class dynamics at that age, it's really difficult to balance it for everybody so that everybody actually has a good outcome. If you're born in August and are basically 12 months behind of October and you're 12 months ahead, so to speak, it's a really hard balance for everyone involved.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, it's all very well saying that the age gap closes up as they get older. I think we all recognise that. But the fact is, these kids only get one run at this, and the teachers only get one chance at teaching the child in front of them. So what are we saying to reception teachers? Well, it doesn't really matter what you do later on, they'll all be in the same place anyway, and for parents, nothing is more important than what is happening to their own child at that time. I would like us to dig a little bit deeper now into this idea of age-related development, which we use so often in assessment and reporting. But I think we should probably have a think about the implications of that. So, Kate, coming to you. In your experience, are there aspects of children's development which tend to vary most? Are there things which they tend to be more or less in the same place on when it comes to their development, and things that can really vary according to age? Or is it more complicated than that?
It's far more complex than that.
Of course it is. It always is.
Yeah. I mean, there can be trends. We talk about trends. We talk about boys being less kind of ready on a maturity level for school by the time they are reception age. There is talk about girls typically being more academic than boys at 4 years old. But in all honesty, the groups that I've had come through over the last 10 years, no child is the same. You can't put them in a box. One child that might be excelling in one area may have gaps in another. Every child is different. And I think that what we really need to be thinking about is how we meet each child individually where they are at the time. And an experienced practitioner will be able to do that and will be able to adapt learning across a group for each individual child. So, yeah.
Of course. And it does make you think, when you were saying just now about how there talk of girls being more academic or school ready at the age of 5, you've got to ask yourself how much of that is because of social expectations of the way that we expect little girls to behave as opposed to the way that we expect little boys to behave.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we know that neurodevelopmentally boys, brains develop at a different rate in different ways than girls. There are elements in every way. Just because a child is academic doesn't mean that they are ready for school. So we need to be looking at that full skill set, don't we? What do they need to be school ready?
Absolutely. And Nathan, it seems to me that the more we start out with this chronological linked understanding of development, the more embedded it gets over time. And we know how often it is that at secondary school, for example, a child will be given, and I really don't like this term, a flight path when they arrive at year 7, very often based on a very limited range of tests they've taken in year 6. And it's literally a straight line from there to their GCSEs. But I mean, surely children don't develop in straight lines.
I mean, they really don't. You probably heard my groan when you said flight paths, because a lot of schools are obsessed with them. And actually, maybe not something for today, but one of the things, controversial things I've been thinking about recently is, what if we just got rid of all data and just didn't bother with it anymore, including flight paths? But yeah, I've spent a lot
definitely one for another day.
But I've spent time previously, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, when I was actually working on assessment, on student grouping, mixed attainment versus setting flight paths. I mean, you get to year 11 and everyone's given a prediction. Based upon what you did here, you're going to be able to get here. And then it's on the teachers to get them there. And even an average isn't taken. It's like, that student's only made a quarter of a grade's progress. This student's made... Yeah, there are a huge number of issues with flight paths just in terms of predicting. It's very, very hard to predict where a student is going to end up. That they come into secondary, aged 11, they're going to be there for 5 years, maybe 7 years. Who knows what's going to happen during those teenage years? What about the home factors? What about friendship? There are so many things that impact that. And like you say, it's not as if the data we're getting is completely rock solid. It's based off a few assessments and a little bit of data we have from year 6 going up into year 7. And then we make these huge predictions based upon it. And I know maybe I shouldn't admit to this, but I know that when I was having a look at year 7 groupings, when I was ahead of maths, the SATs data column, I would sort of just hide it because it gave some information. It was somewhat helpful. But honestly, I just wanted to look past the data and actually look at the humans who were in front of me, rather than just sort of be like, I've got 150 SAT scores here. I'm going to determine classes based upon that. And that's going to be your flight path for the next 5 years. It just seems unfair to put so much weighting on something. And like you say, it's not a linear growth pathway anyway.
Yeah. And Kate, presumably, in the world of early years education, which is where your professional expertise is, it's full of talk of milestones, isn't it? It's full of talk of the things that children need to hit at certain ages, and it's the parents right from the off start to get really worried if their child isn't hitting these milestones. Do those milestones feel like a huge pressure on you as a professional? Do they interfere sometimes with you wanting to work with the children as you want to work with them?
They serve a purpose for sure, because we are looking to support children as much as we can, and so those milestones can be helpful to see whether or not additional support is needed. It does give us a picture of that child. We're quite lucky in the early years that they've widened those milestones. Over the last few years, we've changed how we're assessing children, the age gaps between milestones now, that we're giving children a lot more time to meet those milestones. So I feel like the pressure's not as bad as it used to be. It is difficult, when you're speaking to parents and they are looking at these kind of like judgments for their children, and their child might not be hitting them within that age. We have to just really, really, give that support to parents to say, like every child, they will get there. they just need some time. We have to look at the whole picture rather than breaking it down across each of the 7 areas of learning. You know, some children will be excelling, some children might be slightly behind. It's a tough one. I think they are necessary in a way. I don't know how much attention we need to pay to them. It's a hard one.
And I do think that they become less useful and more arbitrary once you move into that year by year progression that children move through, the key stages of primary and secondary. Because at that point, when everyone knows how little time there is in a school year, it's gone in a flash. By the end of that year, everyone in that group, regardless of their chronological age, you know, they've been lumped together over and there could be 12 months, as we've said, between the oldest and the youngest of them, but they have all got to hit this target by the end of this year. And yeah, I think it does get worrying then. But then, of course, in comes those two really heavy lifting words in education. The first of which is differentiation, and the second of which is interventions. Do we think that throwing enough carefully thought out differentiation and enough carefully thought out interventions into a chronologically based system might be enough to give every child what they need from their education? That is a big question, Nathan, but I am going to throw it at you.
So I guess I'm gonna answer it with a different point. I'm gonna zoom out and go, well, if we didn't have a chronological system and if we tried to organise students in a different way, I still don't think it would. Well, it wouldn't remove the need for differentiation, adapted teaching, for interventions, for scaffolds. So I'm a huge advocate of mixed attainment teaching. In the maths departments I worked in, they either were mixed attainment or we moved towards mixed attainment rather than trying to assess and group students in different ways of attainment. But I think that regardless of the way in which we group students are all individual, and the sort of the huge range of topics that we're teaching. You know, like I say, I taught secondary maths, but how good a student is in algebra, they might be at a completely different attainment level for geometry, for probability, for statistics, whatever it might be. And so I think that differentiation, that adaptation, that scaffolding, that additional support will always be required, however we group our students, because some students are going to get some things quicker than others. And those who aren't getting it quite as quickly are going to need a little bit more support, maybe working with the TA, maybe a scaffold, whatever it might be. But I think, regardless of the way that we are grouping our students, those are practices which are really important. And picking up on something Kate mentioned earlier, that obviously in an early year setting, those teachers are skilled to be able to cater for all of the different students and to provide activities that support them all. And I think we need that in whatever subject we're teaching or whatever phase we're teaching. We've constantly got to adapt for the 20, the 25, the 30, the 35 learners in front of us. We've constantly got to be looking, assessing, changing, adapting our practice, based upon what we're seeing.
This is great. You've raised ahead to the next question that I was going to raise with you, actually, which is good. I like this. It means the conversation is going in the right way, because the next thing I wanted us to think about was, if we don't organise children by age, how do we organise them? Because there is the question of scale here, isn't there? And much as we would like to take every child through an entirely personalised learning journey, you've got to somehow scale that up. So I'm just going to ask for some pearls of wisdom from you, Kate, because you probably have a greater age range of charges that you're looking after at one time than any teacher in primary or secondary. What kind of age difference are we talking about?
So it all depends. From my point of view, I don't work from a nursery. I am a childminder. So everyone is in one group within a nursery setting. They will divide them up slightly into age group or ability. But for me, I've had children as young as 12 months old with children that are in their last year before school. What we really need to think about is how we're teaching our children. I'm a massive advocate of play-based learning. I wonder how much easier it would be to teach a wider age group of children in a school-based setting if more of our learning was done through play-based provision and active learning. Because from our point of view as early years practitioners, I'm not going to say it's super easy, but I feel like the opportunities for us to be able to, differentiate that teaching is they just present themselves in that kind of active environment. I wonder if we did look at more play-based learning to an older age in primary specifically, I wonder how much more support, how much easier that would be for our teachers to be able to do that.
What do you think, Nathan?
I think that's a really big question.
Of course.
So it would be such a monumental change, wouldn't it? It would be such a huge change. I think I'd probably still come back to the point of, I don't really think it matters how students are grouped. What you're almost saying, Kate, is that we need, well, I don't want to sort of put words in your mouth, so obviously correct me if I'm on, but obviously we need a pedagogical approach. We need an approach to teaching our students that engages all of them, that caters to where they are and gives them the activities and the supports and the scaffolds to get them to go to where we need them to go to. I mean, I'm quite lucky. I was secondary trained, taught in secondary, but I've spent quite a lot of time in the last year or so in early year settings, and it's been fascinating watching continuous provision and seeing how that works, because obviously it's a world away from teaching 16-year-olds how to do maths just before they do their GCSEs. It's a completely different job, isn't it? But yeah, I think there's definitely a lot in there in terms of how we teach students and in terms of the resources that we use. And I guess here, this is where I'd probably lean into my sort of experiences around mixed attainment teaching in maths and moving away from the chalk and talk that we may all sort of remember from how we were taught maths when we were at school, that, you'd have a question on the board, out would come the textbooks and you'd work your way through them, and everyone was in a different set and based upon what you'd scored in a previous test, and that was it. Whereas obviously, as we move towards mixed attainment teaching, especially in maths, and we look at more reasoning questions, we have more discussion-based activities, we have things which are more interactive, we have those group debates. So I think all of those things are more interactive, use of the manipulatives. I think all of these things can move towards that system, and actually all of those things do help to alleviate the gaps we have, whether those are gaps caused by when an individual is born or due to any other factor. Actually, just teaching in those ways, giving lots of different students different ways of engaging and giving lots of different opportunities to engage, rather than here's the question, here's the textbook, now do, is really, really important. So, Kate, hopefully I've not put words into your mouth.
No, not at all. But something you did just say, sparked a little thought in my head, in that, we're discussing at the moment the kind of experience from a teacher's perspective, but we haven't spoken about what it's like to be a child in that environment. And I think one of my biggest concerns as an early years practitioner is that children are play-based up until end of reception, and clearly play-based provision works, because in that first year they're at school, they learn an incredible amount. They're nailing their phonics, their early mathematics, their early STEM, we can see that it works. So when they hit year one, I don't understand why that all of a sudden we go, no, not anymore. No more playing for you. This is how we're going to learn. And for those children, especially the 4-year-olds, we're thinking about the 4-year-olds, they've come into school and they're thinking, this is great. The step up is not much more than at nursery. It feels kind of natural. What does their experience feel like when they hit year one and they're having to learn in a different way, and that maybe they're starting to notice that they're not finding it as easy, or it's a bit more of a struggle, or their peers are slightly above them? Children are innate, they love to learn, they're curious, they're fascinated, they want to know more. It's not just about meeting their needs, it's about making sure that we're keeping that spark, that love of learning going. I worry for some children that we kill that spark and that love of learning dies a little bit, and then they find the whole experience is a different journey for them than those children that find it easier. And I think we do need to look at what we're providing, and it's not just about the academic, what grades we're coming out with, it's the experience that we're having along the way as well.
Yeah, it's extraordinary to me, actually, how rarely we look at the way that the education system is set up from the perspective of the very people for whom it's supposed to work, and the people who start struggling, whether that's when things change in year one, or when things change in year 7, or when things change in year 10, or wherever. When they start struggling, we implicitly or explicitly tell them that it's them. Everyone else is doing all right. So clearly there's something about you that's not, knuckling down and doing what you need to do in order to suit the system, it's quite chilling, isn't it, really? And it does lead us on to the next bit of the discussion that I want us to go into. And that is a bit of an elephant in the room, which I'm going to lead in, and I'm going to shine a light right in the elephant's eyes, and we're going to interrogate it, because there is another way of sorting children that we have tried in this country, and it still exists in some areas of the country, and in other countries they do it in a different way. What I'm dancing around is the idea of separating children to keep them with their academic peers rather than their chronological peers. And that might be through something like the grammar system. And, let's not think for a moment how terribly the secondary moderns failed their pupils, which was why essentially the grammar system as a whole was not sustainable. But also you can enlarge that. It's, the grammar system is quite narrow. I think you take a pretty narrow academic test at 11, and it divides you off into likely to get 7s to 9s and likely to not, and that's it. But if you look at somewhere like the system in Germany, that takes a broader approach, doesn't it? And it looks at whether you might be more apt for a more vocational path or a more hands-on path or whatever. And I wonder if there is a way of dividing children up like that isn't discriminatory and that doesn't cut children off from their aspirations. Kate, what do you think?
I think that's really interesting, because not every child is academic. Some children are going to go and be completely successful in their life doing something vocational. And I think that we need to realise that we need to start valuing more than just the academic grades. When I was at school, we all went to college. My school year seemed to divide up. The vocational children went to one college and the academic children went to another one. So it happens anyway later on.
Yeah.
Why can that not happen earlier? Why are we not valuing those aspects of each child that they really shine in? It's interesting to me that we do that in the early years, and then they get to school and our expectations of them change. All of a sudden, they're not meeting expectations. Some children are not meeting the expectations that they were used to before. It's interesting that the early years seem to be so far away from formal education.
Do you mean that in the early years we're tracking a much broader range of skills?
100%. Yes. I feel that school is very, very academic. We're valuing the creative side of children in early years. There's a massive, massive kind of push to ensure that children are having creative experiences every single day. That's valued in the early years. I feel that, we're prioritising maths, English, STEM subjects once they get to school. And that's not all children. Every child has a future and every child has a chance to be successful in something. It doesn't necessarily have to be those academic subjects.
No, but of course, at the same time, because children develop at different rates, and it's not linear, and some children might not be academic at the age of 5, but suddenly at the age of 12 discover a passion for physics that it just takes them somewhere they never even knew they would go. So you don't want to be shutting off avenues to people at an earlier age. What do you reckon, Kate?
No, and I don't think you have to. I don't think just because when they're younger, they might not be showing kind of a natural kind of affinity for one aspect. I think that we can't be deciding pathways for children when they're so young. Everything changes. We see it every single day. A child that we feel may not be doing something 1 month, 6 weeks later is absolutely wowing us by, being the complete opposite of what we were predicting. I don't think it's possible to do that. And I think that it would only be fair to kind of meet children where they're at every point of their educational journey. And I don't think that's defined by age.
No. Nathan, what do you think? Do you think there's another way of doing this, which is more about encouraging children along the path of things they are best at rather than a chronologically determined pathway with fixed milestones along that route?
So there are many things that sort of Kate was just saying that I'm in agreement with. Obviously, it's about the whole child, about this whole learner, giving them what they need. I think some of the concerns that jump out to me, for example, if we were to group by attainment or pathway or where a student is in their development, I can just well imagine a 9-year-old still being the one who is stuck in the class with a majority of 7-year-olds and feeling like they're, oh, look, I'm the old one, I'm the odd one out, or, I'm only operating at the age of a 7-year-old. I can imagine that for SEN learners, would that come with a greater stigma if they are working on processing capacity and all those sorts of things, and maybe they are operating behind age-related expectations, but they're then put into a group with students who are far younger. I've maybe got sort of concerns around that. And I think my gravest concern is around assessments. I have huge concerns about how we assess in our system as it is, the way that we use SATs, the way that we use GCSEs. I think there are strengths to it, but I've also got huge concerns about how we do it. And I've got huge concerns about how a lot of schools go about grouping students together, whether it's streaming or set, because we have within chronological system, we have different ways already of grouping students together, don't we? In terms of by attainment, in terms of whether it's within streaming, whatever it might be. But we don't have one of those systems which works really, really well. It's not as if we can shine a light and say, actually, setting has been an absolute blessing and it's provided every single student with everything that they need. And this is a revolutionary new way of teaching. It's the same is also true of mixed attainment. We can't actually say that mixed attainment is the absolute silver bullet and that is the perfect way of teaching students. So I don't think that we've got a model really of grouping students, which means that all of those students get precisely what they actually need. And I think we actually group a lot of students together and it doesn't mean that they end up getting what they need. So I think however we end up doing it, we're just going to move from one grouping to another that's going to probably have a lot of issues with it. I mean, I have issues with labels like PP or SEN. Well, just because 2 students are PP doesn't mean they need the same thing. Just because 2 students are SEN doesn't mean they need the same thing. So actually what Kayte was saying about, actually there's so many different things we can look for. There's so many different points. There are scaffolds we can put in place. Actually thinking about how we teach. We talked about sort of play-related teaching, about opening it up, about those discussion opportunities, thinking about all of those sorts of things. I think however we decide to group students together, there are going to be issues. And I think we've got to work within whatever system we have. And we have a sort of a chronological, we have an age group system, don't we? And I think we've got to work really, really hard that all subjects and all pathways are seen equally as important. If you decide that you want to become a plumber, an electrician, go into hair and beauty, or you want to go and study physics at Oxford, okay, great. You are all contributing to our society, and that is what matters. If you're finding something that you enjoy and you've made progress and all of the skills are at a point they need to be, and then you've got an area of expertise, that's fantastic. So yeah, I think I've just got so many grave concerns about how we do things anyway, that I just see that an alternative would just present new problems probably.
So perhaps what we're saying is that mixed age teaching is not the worst problem, and perhaps we're focusing on the wrong issue here. Kayte?
Yeah, I just feel like you need to have some system, don't you, in place. You need to have some way of grouping
There's a lot of children.
100%. And I do think that grouping them by age does make sense. I just think that we need to be reconsidering what our expectations are, and the differentiation, and making sure that we've got an enabling environment for all children. We know it works in the early years, and whether or not we've got a group of children that are all the similar, like my group at the moment are all within kind of a year of each other. So I don't have a massive mixed age group at the moment. I'm still having to adapt teaching for all of those children in my group because their development is very, very varied. I think we just need to look at what our expectations are, how we're assessing, and what we're valuing in the classroom. They're the changes that we need to make.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And I can see Nathan nodding as well. This has been such a great discussion. My head is buzzing with everything that we've covered. And I'm sure we could carry on for a lot longer. But the clock is warning me that our booked session in the secret meeting room is nearly over. And experience tells me that it is definitely not wise to play fast and loose with the automated booking system. People get very cross indeed. So I am going to have to move us forward towards the final section of this episode. And that is the moment where I ask you for your verdicts. So I am going to ask you both, when it comes to the rule, summer-born kids must stay put, should we keep it, lose it, or give it a serious rethink? And I'm going to shake things up and come to you first, Kate.
It's still really tough. We've spoken about it for 3/4 of an hour and I still don't really know kind of what I feel.
We haven't fixed everything in this one episode of a podcast.
No. It's funny that, isn't it? We do need to reconsider, what age children start academic education. I do think we need to look at the time that they get in play-based learning. I think we could extend that. I think that would be helpful. But I think that it would be too difficult currently to be able to do anything other than age-related groups. I just think we need to look at the provision, how we're adapting that for our children in those kind of set age groups at the moment.
What about you, Nathan? What's your verdict?
I think that the conclusion Kate's come to there is pretty much echoes my own. I think we've got a system, and any other system is going to come with its own difficulties and own problems. But I think we need to stick with the system that we've got. And we just need to make sure that provision is consistently and constantly getting better. And we continue to review what we're doing to make sure that all of our learners can get the support, the adaptive provision, the scaffolds that they need and that they deserve. That would be my conclusion to it. That there's alternatives maybe look appealing, but none of them necessarily have a quick solution to any of these problems we face. So actually, we've got a system, let's roll with it, but let's actually make sure that the students within that system get the support that they need.
Perfect. So we may not have fixed the system entirely, but I reckon we have given the powers that be, who I'm sure, by the way, are all listening, a lot to think about, and I hope they do. Kate, Nathan, thank you so much for sharing your time and your experience and your expertise with us today. It's been great. And to everyone listening, thank you too for being here. I will be back in a couple of weeks with 2 more fabulous guests and another rule to put to the test. So do keep your eye out for that dropping wherever you find your podcasts. And if there's a school regulation that you reckon deserves a serious challenge, why not drop us a line and let us know? The details are in the episode notes. Thank you again, everyone. And remember, until we meet again, keep questioning, keep learning, and no running in the corridors.